All right.
Okay, we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Hope for the Soul. Like us, heart us, share us. Tell everybody and your mother about Hope for the Soul.
So good. Dad, what's up?
Well, I'm glad we let Kayla get in front of the camera and then say something today.
Our likes will go up.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
she's so on board.
We're happy that Kayla's with us. My good friend, Pastor Rick Flowers, is with us today. And we've been trying to figure out how to make this happen. So we called a meeting down here in Lufkin, gathered a few people up, just so we could have this sit together. And welcome, Brother Rick. Glad
Thank
you're
you.
here.
It's a joy to be here.
I'm real thankful that you could find time for this. And I just wanted us to spend a few minutes together. A few years ago, we had a little trial in life, and we didn't know who our friends were in the moment. We didn't know what was going on. It's one of those moments when you're evaluating everything, and then one day my phone rang, and it was you. I knew you, but we didn't know each other. And you stormed into my life, and you said, I want to be your friend. And I don't have many friends, and so I responded the same way. Well, I don't have many friends either, so since we don't have friends, nobody likes us. How about we just be friends? And that started a lot of years of friendship here. And welcome into my world. Glad you're here.
Well, let me give a little background on that. Before calling you, my wife had been reading and following your wife on Facebook.
Okay.
And so we were headed to the district conference in Longview. And my wife said, you know, there's someone I wish we could get to know better. And she said, that's Kent and Tracy Smith. And so we just made it our goal to pursue that. And I think we actually went out to a meal then. I had called you, and then we met up at that conference. And that's what began an incredible friendship that has run deep, and to this day, it's very much alive.
Well, I'm glad to have a friend. And then our boys, they've become friends.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we went and ate together in Indianapolis last year, or year before last, whenever we were in Indianapolis. It all runs together at this point. But I would like to say that I just learned something very, very, I think it's pretty comical that Dad, Brother Flowers, really doesn't want to be your friend.
I caught that too.
It wasn't about me.
It's all Sister Renee.
Well, I'm not sure that I meant that way.
No, you did.
But I have always done what my wife tells me to do, so she tells me to be your friend, so here we are.
Be so nice to him. Be nice to him. Be gentle with him.
Oh, it's so funny.
And that's one thing about this particular podcast. A lot of time we dig deep into deep subjects, and we get revelations, we get great things.
Oh, there's so much wisdom that flows here, Brother Flowers.
Oh, absolutely. And Dad was on here a few days ago, and we learned things about him, and we've had others here. But I just wanted us to act like we act when we're down at Bob Bazaar, or we're out at the lake or something, how do we act then? I mean, we're not really. A lot of time we don't have a tie on, and a lot of time it's an old greasy restaurant somewhere. I mean, a bowl of gumbo, or that crazy place that we go to up in the woods. It's a bunch of garages linked together.
Yeah.
And we just laugh.
For catfish.
Yeah, absolutely. We just laugh. And so, in your life, you came from Tennessee.
Born and raised.
And you look like a fairly dignified fella, but
He got to Texas as fast as he could.
there you go. Yeah, but really, tell me about your Tennessee life. Don't you have a little hillbilly in you or something there?
Well, I don't know about hillbilly, but certainly came from farms in western Tennessee. I never lived on a farm, but my grandparents had farms. And I was born and raised in Memphis, and received the Holy Ghost when I was 9 years old. And my older brother felt a call to preach at 12. And it wasn't just just a whim, he felt a call to preach and began to get invitations to preach revivals at 14.
Wow.
And so
This is David.
He took me with him because I could play and sing a little bit. And so we ended up spending our teenage years. I began traveling at 12. He was 14. And I traveled until I was 19 every summer when we'd get out of school. And then when he went to college, he went to Bible school in Canada. And when he'd come home for the summer, we would travel, preach revivals. And that's actually the way he paid for his Bible school in Canada. He couldn't work in Canada because he was an American citizen. So he would preach and make enough money in the summers to pay for his school. And that really molded and shaped me. And then I moved to Nashville, joined a church staff there. That's where I met Renee, and began to preach at 21 myself. Traveled for 2 years, married during that time. Ended up in Pasadena, Texas with Brother Arliss Glass, who is still my pastor to this day. And Brother Glass was quite an impact on me. I loved the church that he pastored, and I felt I could learn a lot from him, and I did. And then in 1980, we were elected pastor in Dallas. And we spent 40 years there as the pastor of that congregation. God blessed us, blessed the church. And we've had a wonderful life, been married 46 years.
The same woman.
Well, yes, same woman.
Good for you, because you could have had 3 women there and it'd still be 46 years.
Yeah, well, it's just been one.
And congratulations.
And, have 2 sons, and both of them in the ministry. Our oldest son now pastors the church, and we have 6 grandbabies. So we're very, very happy.
Here a while back, you told me about your first revival. I believe it was in Ohio.
Cincinnati.
So tell us about that.
Oh, my goodness. I had never preached a sermon. And when I resigned the church position in Nashville, which I'd been there 2 years, I informed the pastor that I was going on the evangelistic field. Well, I was not a preacher. And
you did music in Nashville, right?
I did music, yeah. I never preached, and never presented myself as a preacher. And he was quite stunned at this announcement, and I really was quite stunned at it as well. But God had been doing some things in my life, and I don't know that it is the way I would recommend any young person to start. But Brother Norm Pasley, who a lot of people would remember Brother Norm Pasley, his father, Norman R. Pasley, had come into my life and was quite an influence. And he said, well, if you're going to preach, I'd like you to preach your first sermon in my church. Well, after he said that, about probably 2 weeks later, I called him. I said, I'm leaving Nashville, and I'm going to evangelize. He said, well, if you're going to do that, I want you to preach your first revival in my church. And so I went to Cincinnati to preach a revival 1 week, and that turned into 8 weeks. And I was...
You had never preached yet.
I had never preached until I stepped into that pulpit that first Sunday night. I think it was February the 4th, 1975. And I never will forget, 6 people got the Holy Ghost that night. 4 people were baptized in Jesus' name. And driving home, or riding home with Brother Pasley, I was just trying to figure out what had happened. It was the most exuberant experience of my life, and yet I really didn't know how that had all happened. And then we went on to have a tremendous revival. It lasted 8 weeks, and I think 39 people were baptized, 41 or 42 received the Holy Ghost.
Wow.
And it was just an incredible experience and a great launching for me. I remember Brother Pasley told me, he said, Brother Flowers, he said, you need to recognize not every place is going to be like this. Mm-hmm. And boy, was he right. But I'll have to say that I never had a bad revival. Mm-hmm. I was treated by preachers and their families with such grace and respect and love, and made a lot of friends. And my fourth revival brought me to Texas, Brother Arliss Glass.
Okay.
And Brother Glass and I bonded, and that became a life-changing connection. Brother Glass had me come back to Pasadena. We had great revivals. I think both times I preached, I think they were 3 weeks long. And at the end of the first revival, he invited me to come and work with him. And I was so excited about what I was doing, I turned him down. And he said, well, when you change your mind, he said, I believe it's the will of God. And when you change your mind, he said, call me. And so that's what eventually happened. And we ended up spending 3+ years with Brother Glass. And that was probably my Bible school, my Bible college.
Okay.
He was tremendous, a great pastor and a great influence to this day. I've never made a major decision without talking to him.
How about that?
And he's never steered me wrong. So,
absolutely. Well, life has taken some turns now, and you've grown, you've matured. Apparently, you're grinning, so I guess we can probably assume Brother Glass, if he asked you twice to come off the evangelist field to be his assistant, he must not have thought you were much of a preacher either.
Oh, my goodness.
well, I'd like to think maybe he saw something that could be used, although I will say when he brought me there to work with him, and I'd preached him some revivals, but he told me, he said, I'm not bringing you here to preach. He said, I'm the preacher. He said, but you're going to work.
Yeah.
And he said, you're going to learn everything else about pastoring.
Wow, that's good.
And I think in my 3+ years there, I think he heard me preach twice. I preached a lot. I'd preach when he wasn't there. And then I eventually took the Bible class on Sunday mornings, but he always was in the office. He wasn't out there in the Bible class. So, but he gave me a foundation about dealing with people. And I really didn't starve too much for preaching. I preached enough, but we tend to think that when we're called to preach, that's what we're supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. But he gave me a whole flip side to that, and great church, great opportunity. We went through building programs, and of course, just everyday life with that congregation was an incredible experience.
We were together a few months ago. It was during the COVID season. We were in Dallas, and we drove by the old church site.
Yeah.
And unbeknownst to you, they had torn it down the day before.
Yeah.
And it was a pile of of rocks. Yeah. And we pulled in, and we loaded my car down with bricks off that old building. We took them to your house.
Right.
That old place in Dallas, I know that you were extremely touched that day. And that journey from that inner city, older church into more of a suburban environment and the growth God's given you. What is your thoughts or emotions in part of that journey? From, say, you saw that old building gone. I know you sold it and it was gone, but when you actually saw it gone.
It was, we knew they were going to tear it down. But when you and Tracy and Renee and I drove by that night, I was not aware that that process had actually started. I knew that the buyer from us, the purchaser from us, had sold the building, and a developer was demolishing everything. All he wanted was the land. So we knew that was going to happen, but we were shocked that we were not aware it was actually coming down when we drove up. There was just a heap of brick, and so I wanted to get as much of that building as I could because it represented so much history. Mm-hmm. Emmanuel Church was started in 1940, so when I went there, it was in its 40th year. Paul Hush had pastored it 34 of those 40 years. Mm-hmm. He came in 1946. It was an original affiliated church with the United Pentecostal Church in 45. So it had a lot of meaning to me. Those buildings, Brother Hush had built those buildings, and so I wanted to try to get as much of that history as I could. Those bricks doesn't mean anything to many people, but they mean a lot to me, and they mean a lot to some members of our church. We build on our past, we build on our history, and we build on the people that have influenced us and helped us become whatever we are. And Paul Hush was an incredible man. Emmanuel was a great church when I went there. It's been a great church all the years that we were there, but so much of that I had nothing to do with.
Mm-hmm.
I was blessed to build on basically a problem-free church, and it has remained that way for 82 years. They've been an extremely focused church. They have a tremendous foundation that I credit Paul Hush with putting in that church. And so it made the transition to me very, very easy. That's not to say there weren't challenges, and there weren't some mistakes made along the way, but God was with us. And our heart and our desire was always revival, always growth, always expanding. And I will have to say that for the first 16 years of being there, we saw very little other than maintaining.
Uh-huh.
I buried in a church, we were running about 100 to 110 members on a Sunday, 110 in attendance. I buried 30 members in 15 years. One every 6 months was the average. And
A generational turnover.
it was just, it was an older congregation when I went there. So I knew that we were maintaining. We would be able, we were replacing. Numbers weren't dropping, but we weren't gaining any traction. And I knew that relocating the church, getting it out of that downtown setting, it was in an industrial area at that time. It probably wasn't that way so much when the church went there, but that's what it had become. And so moving out, getting into the suburbs, 73% of our congregation lived on the east side of Dallas by then. Our church was just west of downtown. And so I knew that we needed to get out where our people were. And so when we made the move, everything changed. Everything changed. And the church saw a lot of growth, a lot of good things. And today, I have very few regrets, but one of them is I just wish Brother Hush had lived long enough to see what his congregation and his church has become, because it is a great church today.
Let me fast forward a few years, and then there was a new district formed in the North Texas area, and the brethren chose you to lead them. And I hear, now that's, you're laughing about it, and I really am, because we both know the real guy here. And so, if any of those guys, if any of those board members, if they see this, then just grin with us, all right? But they made a great choice in you.
Yes, it did.
And the atmosphere of their meetings, extremely positive, a lot of faith, a lot of unity there. Just give me a snapshot of what it appears, how you view the whole North Texas experiment.
I'll have to say that I never had a lot of organizational work experience. I'd served on some committees, spent 13 years on the Global Missions Board, and I loved that experience. And I understood that if I were elected superintendent, I'd have to leave that board. And so that was a strong pull in me to not run. Brother Arlen Gidrose met with us the morning after. He met our formation committee the morning after we were awarded the district at the general conference. And he said to the committee, he said, now you brethren have done this. You've led this area into a new district. He said, I need a commitment from you that you, if your name appears on any nomination for office of any kind, that you will not pull your name down. He said, it is not fair that you would lead these brethren into the formation of a new district and then refuse to run or hold an office. So all of us on that committee that morning pledged that we would not pull our name down, no matter what we were nominated for. So when we went to the formation conference, myself and two of my wonderful friends, the three of us were the top three names, and we were all a part of the formation conference committee. And so I'm sure these brethren felt the same as I did. I don't think anybody was really wanting or hoping or anticipating or making plans. I think all of us were willing to serve if this is what the brethren wanted. But it was a bit of a bittersweet moment for me when I was elected, because when I walked to the podium to accept that, I knew I was walking away from the Global Missions Board. And but I will have to say, I have never been a part of anything more positive. We are now 6 years old as a district. Our gatherings are still as electrifying and anointed and charged with excitement. I've never been a part of anything like it. And I've known great fellowship through the years, and I've been a member of the Tennessee district, a member of the Texas district, and both of those experiences were good. But I just will, from a personal experience, have to say that North Texas has been very, very special for me. I have a tremendous team, a lot of talented people, and so I have told many people I really don't do much. I just get to ride at the front of the ship, and we a lot of great men. We seem to, none of us seem to be trying to outdo each other. We recognize that we got here together, and that we're going to become whatever we become together. And so I'm amazed. Every board meeting, every district gathering, it is so charged with excitement and enthusiasm. So I'm grateful. And it's an honor, a high honor, and a privilege to serve the brethren. And they've been very, very kind to me.
So here we are in our 60s. And at some point, we have to begin to mature and act like adults. And so when you arrive at this place where you are now, you're substantially older than I am, but you're about out of those 60s, and I'm just getting there. But we're still kind of there. I want to maybe throw one word out. I don't know if we've ever talked about this in all the conversations. What does legacy look like or feel like? Are you hoping for yourself?
Well, I heard it said that no one has success without a successor. Mm-hmm. And there has to be not just the roll of a dice and a hope so that somehow it all works out. I think you have to plan.
Yes.
You have to plan, and you have to make decisions far in advance. From a pastoral standpoint, in 2014, my wife and I had been pastor of the church 34 and a half years, and we knew that we wanted to have everything in place and ready to release the church by the time we had been there 40 years. So that became our goal. And we spent a lot of time working with the church board and eventually with the congregation in laying out a plan that would elect a pastor. We created a whole new set of bylaws where the church actually has two elected offices. It has the office of pastor, and it has the office of senior pastor. The office of senior pastor is the one that must be filled. The office of pastor pretty much exists for transitional purposes. Mm-hmm. But the church was gracious and kind, as they had done for all the years we'd been there. They followed our vision, and they listened to our advice. And our son Chad had been on staff for 7 years. He had been preaching, I think, for 12 years at that time. He had been born and raised in the church. Everybody knew him. He had no baggage to have to try to get rid of from mistakes he'd made. He'd just been a great young man. And so I told the church board, I said, I would like to present his name alone for a straight up and down vote. And if he's not elected, then we will move forward. It has to be the church's decision. But we were so grateful that the church overwhelmingly elected him as pastor. And then he and I began a process of working for 5.5 years on transition. I was very upfront with the church. I told them that I would serve till the 40th year, and then and at the 40th year, we would set a date in that year, which we did. I served 40 years and 8 weeks, and we transitioned the church to Chad and Mindy. And last year was a record year for the church in every way. And the church he's been pastor, be 2 years this August. So I'm very happy with the district work. I think it's a little different because I don't select the next superintendent. Matter of fact, I could see that as a negative to whoever I would recommend, that it becomes political. I don't intend to ever do that. But our district, the brethren are very smart. They're very fair. And I think they pray. They make decisions with a desire for the will of God. And so at that time, they'll find the right man to carry on, and I'll drop right back in line and be a foot soldier and do everything I can to help the next man succeed.
Thank you for coming on today and spending time with us. We're friends, and
Always.
And I value that relationship as much as I value any relationship at all. And so thank you for, like we say a lot of times, thank you for being my friend.
Well, we do say that a lot, and I hadn't said anything about Brother Trent, but I'm proud of him. Our sons are friends, and of course we're all friends, and that's probably the greatest gift that we can have.
Relationships.
It's relationships.
It's very special.
So I want to thank you for coming. I've just released this week, and I wanted to give you a copy of it. Just do it right here because to say
I sent
thank
you
you.
a message that I wanted you to sign it.
All right. Well, I put on this. I already signed this while you was coming.
Okay.
And I put a big X and little X on it, because I'm a junior. That's the best I could do.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
But
so
I love
much.
you, and
I love you.
thank you for spending time with us.
Okay.
And thank you for joining us on Hope for the Soul for this episode. Follow us, like us, subscribe, share, and we will see you back next week.